Hello, everyone. You're listening to Psychology Outside the Box. My name is Dr. Flower. I have a PhD in psychology, so I'm not a wannabe or a knockoff. I've been teaching college and university courses for 20 years. Psychology is a vast field that connects to many things in your life. If you have a curious mind, you're definitely in the right place. This podcast will be interesting and informative, fun but factual. I will open your mind to new ideas and new ways of thinking. So sit back and enjoy the ride. You would probably be offended if someone told you that your pain was all in your head. But guess what? That is actually true. Pain is constructed entirely in the brain. Just because pain is in your head doesn't make it less real. In fact, it's your brain that literally creates what your body feels. For example, if you accidentally hit your finger with a hammer, it might seem that you feel the pain right away in your hand, but that is wrong. In fact, there's a very short delay that allows pain messages to be sent from nerve endings in your finger, up your arm, to your spinal cord, and then to the correct area of the brain. Only when the signals arrive at the brain do you feel the pain, and then you say, ouch, or some other four-letter word like feck or fack. By now, you are checking your hand for blood or possible damage. But the feeling of pain comes from your brain and not from your crushed finger. Likewise, the expression, I saw it with my own eyes, is wrong. Light from objects enters your eyes and hits the retina. Here, the information is converted to neural impulses, millions of tiny electrical signals that travel through the optic nerve to your visual cortex near the back of your head. If there is a donut, cookie, or cupcake on your kitchen table, you do not see the delicious snack immediately. It may feel like you see it right away, but that is just an illusion. Only after the many millions of electrical signals from the retina are analyzed by the visual cortex do we finally recognize the donut, cookie, or cupcake on the table. Visual images are created by your brain and not your eyes. Your eyes help your brain by sending information about the world. Once your brain realizes that the object is in fact a tasty treat and not leftover tofu or celery sticks, you know that it is safe to eat. So the eyes look, but only the brain sees and understands. And when you finally do eat the donut, your taste buds send messages to the brain that allow you to enjoy the delicious flavor. So tastes that are sweet, sour, or salty exist only in your brain and not really in your mouth. The brain makes sense of this information based on previous experience. So, for example, if I say the words, io sono affumato, you will hear the sounds, but your brain likely doesn't understand what they mean. That is because it's an Italian phrase and you lack any knowledge or prior experience in this area. By the way, a loose translation of the phrase is feed me, I'm hungry. It's a very useful phrase that I know in 15 different languages. Sadly, it is true that I'm hungry all of the time. It takes several dozen milliseconds for information from the eye to reach the brain, and more than 100 milliseconds before we can take actions based on that information. In total, the delay between looking and seeing an object is very short, only about 1/10 of a second, but the delay really does exist. So you may feel that you see objects immediately, but that is a mistake. You have probably known since elementary school that we have 5 senses: vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. They are constantly collecting information from our surroundings. But this is only the first stage. All of the data received by our senses are transmitted to special locations in the brain for further analysis. The brain is the seat of all your knowledge, thoughts, emotions, memories, and personality, but it is also the place where you experience everything in your life. Your personal reality exists only in your brain. Eyes are the most complex organ after the brain. Vision provides more information than all the other senses combined. The impressions that you have about reality are built by our brain, but are mostly based on sight, so it's really important to understand how vision works. We can see light coming directly from fire, a light bulb, or the sun. After hitting an object, some of the light bounces off and enters your eyes. The iris is the colored part of the eye that surrounds the black pupil in the center. It controls the amount of light that enters the eye. The lens is a clear part of the eye behind the iris that helps to focus light to form an image on our retina located at the very back of the eye. Light has to get absorbed by the retina in some way in order for us to actually see it. Iris scans are increasingly being used for security purposes. They are fast and accurate. Just like fingerprints, the colors and patterns within the iris are unique. So unique, in fact, that iris scans are better than fingerprint recognition. No two irises are alike, including those of identical twins and even the two irises in each of your own eyes. The retina has a layer of cells called rods and cones. There are about 120 million rods and about 7 million cones in each retina. Rods are extremely sensitive and let us see in almost total darkness, but they don't see colors, and so as twilight approaches, the world fades to shades of gray. The cones allow us to see color and fine detail, but they do not function in very dim light. This is why we don't see color at night. Cones are sensitive to one of three different colors: green, red, or blue. Signals from the cones are sent to the brain, which then translates these messages into the perception of color. Cones, however, work only in bright light. There may be only 3 types of cones, but each one can register about 100 different color shades, and so we can actually distinguish millions of different colors by combining information from the 3 cones. Someone who is colorblind does not have a particular type of cone in the retina, or one type of cone may be weak. The most common is red-green color blindness, which makes it really hard to tell the difference between red and green. Men are far more likely to be colorblind than are women. So a colorblind person will never know if they look really good in red. And M&Ms or Skittles will all look gray, and so not nearly as appealing. Facebook is blue because Mark Zuckerberg is red-green colorblind, and blue was the one color he could see the best. Bill Gates is also colorblind. Like Zuckerberg, dogs cannot distinguish between red and green. Women can be colorblind, but it is very unusual. Color blindness affects only about 1 in every 200 women, compared to 1 in 12 men. That means that 95% of people who have color deficiency are men. The reason for this gender difference has to do with the fact that women have 2 X chromosomes, but men have only a single X. The details are a bit complicated, so I won't bother to explain any more than that. I don't want to confuse you with too many facts. When light rays reach the rods and cones, a process called transduction occurs. The light waves are converted into neural impulses, millions of tiny electrical signals. The pulses then travel through the optic nerve to our brain's visual cortex near the back of your head. These neural impulses, or electrical signals, are also called action potentials. These rapid electrical impulses are what produce our thoughts, behaviors, and perceptions of the world. And your brain never sleeps, so that every moment of the day there are billions of these signals zipping through your brain cells. Your brain is on autopilot, so you do not control and are not even aware of this activity. You are too busy watching Netflix to notice how incredibly hard your brain is working, so you can just relax and enjoy the movie. From the visual cortex, Information from your eyes is sent to about 30 different regions, each specializing in one element of sight, such as shapes, colors, location, and motion. After all this is done, our brain creates a visual image of the object in front of us. We don't really see the outside world. We see a mind-generated representation of the outside world. It's just a simulation in your brain. We can then make decisions and take actions based on what we see with our brain. As I mentioned above, the delay between looking and seeing an object is very short, only about 1/10 of a second, but the delay really does exist. So you may feel that you see objects immediately, but that is wrong. So as you can clearly see, vision happens only when your eyes and brain are working very closely together. The ears receive sound waves, but only the brain hears sounds. So visual images and sounds are created in your brain and not by your eyes or ears. A California man named Michael May made international headlines when his sight was restored by a pioneering stem cell procedures after about 40 years of blindness. While the surgery was a complete success, May still sees the world very differently from most people. His retina now operates perfectly and receives visual information from the outside world, just as we do. The information is changed to electrical signals, which are transmitted through the optic nerve to the visual cortex. So far, so good. But here there is a huge roadblock. May's visual cortex receives the correct electrical signals from outside, but he can't interpret or understand what he is seeing. Years after his surgery, May still walks like a blind man, relying on a cane rather than his eyes. He still lives in a world of abstract shapes instead of recognizable objects that most sighted people take for granted. May has the most difficulty with faces and facial expressions. For example, he still cannot identify his wife by her face alone. Of course, he can recognize her voice. May has the same experience with faces as some people have distinguishing sheep. To him, human faces all look alike. Michael May had never been inhibited by his blindness and had been an expert skier. By receiving verbal instructions from a guide, he became amazingly good at avoiding bumps and trees. In fact, he holds the world downhill speed record of 65 miles per hour for a completely blind person. It may sound surprising, but skiing was actually easier for him before he regained his sight in one eye. After his surgery, he closed his eyes when skiing because his brain was overwhelmed. All of a sudden, there was all this confusing information distracting May. He was falling down all over the place. May's vision remains very limited 15 years after the surgery. So in the end, May's daily life hasn't changed that much. His wife Jennifer laughs and explains that he sorts the laundry by color now. Not exactly a miracle. His eye takes in visual information that is sent to the brain for processing. But at least so far, his brain's ability to understand those signals remains far from normal. All of us were born with no knowledge of the outside world. As babies, we receive visual information from our retinas, and it was sent to the brain for processing. But in the early stages, the information, though fascinating to the infant, makes very little sense. Gradually, each child will learn to recognize favorite toys, familiar objects, people, and eventually herself. But the world is a very complex place with thousands of different objects, and it takes many years of experience to learn everything we need to know. Eventually, a child will learn the difference between a cat and a dog, between a bird and an airplane, between a flower and a tree. This process starts during infancy, but continues into childhood and adolescence. Even as adults, we are still learning more details about the world. Michael May missed this critical learning period, and so normal visual development never really happened. Areas of the brain essential for vision never fully matured. According to MRI scans of his brain activity, these important areas of vision are now dark and inactive. They have wasted away from lack of use and can no longer function properly. So we can fix his eye, but the miracle stops there. We cannot go back in time to his early childhood so that he can experience the learning process necessary for proper visual development. We will now leave the Earth behind as we blast off into outer space. We have to go beyond the Kármán line, that's K-A-R-M-A-N, which is 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface and is usually considered to be the edge of space. As you already know, daylight comes from our friendly neighborhood star that we call the sun. We're really lucky that sunlight can travel through the vast nothingness of space, which is a vacuum. Without the sun, there would be no light, no warmth, and no life. Our planet would be a dark, empty wasteland. Maybe you have heard the expression that in space, no one can hear you scream. Well, it's true that sounds can't travel through the vacuum of space. Interstellar space does contain a bunch of atoms, mostly hydrogen and some helium. Although space is not completely empty, scientists still consider it to be almost a perfect vacuum. It's the best we have, and no better vacuum can ever be created on Earth. So sunlight can travel through the vacuum of space, but not sound. Sound needs a medium through which to move, such as air, water, or a solid object. Sound waves cannot travel through outer space. So in Star Wars, when the rebel forces destroy the Death Star, we see and also hear a tremendous explosion. The sound is there for entertainment value only and is not scientifically accurate. Some people argue that if you are standing right beside the exploding Death Star, you might hear a sound because the Death Star itself contains air particles that would be released during the explosion. This may be true, but I'm not really completely sure. Of course, if we were standing beside the Death Star, the blast would immediately disintegrate every molecule in our body. So if there was some sound, you might not even have a chance to hear it. So we need some volunteers to do this experiment, and of course, we also need an exploding Death Star. We might also have to travel to a galaxy far, far away. So pack some extra clothes and some snacks. By the way, even after all your molecules are vaporized by the exploding Death Star, the billions of atoms in your body will survive and move off to find other uses elsewhere. Nature has been recycling our atoms for millions of years. Humans did not invent recycling. Unless you live in the Star Trek or Star Wars universe where warp drives are possible, light is the fastest thing anywhere, and nothing can go faster than that. It was Einstein's theory of relativity which showed that the universe does have a speed limit, namely the speed of light in a vacuum. So nothing can travel faster than 300,000 kilometers per second, or 186,000 miles per second, which is the speed of light. At this incredible speed, it takes light approximately 8 minutes to reach the Earth from the sun. Now, during a thunderstorm, lightning and thunder occur at precisely the same moment. But light travels 300,000 kilometers per second. This is almost 1,000,000 times faster than sound. So you will always see the lightning flash before you hear the rumbling thunder. The time delay between the lightning flashes and thunder will tell you how far you are from the lightning strike. When you see the lightning flash, start counting slowly like this: 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. If you have reached 5 when you hear the thunder, then the lightning strike was about a mile away. If you reach the count of 10, then the distance was about 2 miles, and so on. Unless you are the hammer-wielding god Thor, being struck by lightning is a shocking experience. One day during a huge storm, I was struggling to figure out how lightning works. and then all of a sudden it struck me. Lightning is always on the lookout for male targets. It is actually true that men are 6 times more likely to be struck by lightning. It is fortunate that lightning doesn't kill all of its victims. Around 90% of people struck by lightning actually survive. In 2021, 3 teens snapped a selfie at exactly the moment they were struck by lightning. Fortunately, no one was killed. Well, all good things must come to an end, including this podcast. But in the words of the Terminator, I'll be back. And I hope you will too. Okay, folks, it's all over for today. We're finished. We reached the end. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I will miss you so very much.